So I've created quite the mess of my life. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch and what is finally feeling like a little bit of normalcy around here. Meaning we're back to working on the lightweight and maybe a little bit of the LR4 truck. As much fun as it was flying out, buying this in San Diego and taking it to the National Rally, if you ask me, working on these things is much more fun. So we're gonna dive back into that lightweight. And a little bit ago, we swapped in that 200 TDI. And if you ask me, a 200 TDI isn't a whole lot of good without an intercooler. So we're gonna change that, I guess, along with making some charge pipes. So we're starting off the day a little bit abnormal, I would say, because we currently have 0 power, which is inconvenient. Also, the power company has no estimated time of repair, which when we're trying to fabricate our intercooler setup for the lightweight poses a problem because, as it turns out, the welder needs power and the saws to cut everything apart also need power. Something we're critically lacking right now. But in some other news, I think the Range Rover's totaled. Should have pulled it in last night. Well, look at that, we have lights again, so now we can get back to the lightweight. And what we're working on here is getting the intercooler mounted. A couple videos ago, I mentioned that that's gonna sit in here. Something like that, but it's not gonna go in there box stock like it is. We're gonna change the outlets top and bottom. And since we're not going crazy on turbo setup, we're just gonna keep the 2-inch piping throughout the whole thing. It's nice and short, and for the flow that puts out is not gonna affect it if we keep it there, because ultimately we're going back down to 2-inch to go into the intake manifold anyways. So no sense in bumping it up to the 2.5 inches that is here. In conjunction with sizing down to match the turbo, we're gonna gain about a 1/2 inch of clearance here and here, which is perfect because an extra inch is going to give us exactly what we need. So what we'll do is slice this corner off along with our outlet tube and then come in and weld in a new piece and then weld on a new outlet. Along with changing from 2.5 inches down to 2 inches, we're going to cut this guy in half, I think, and we'll come out of the intercooler at a 45-degree angle on top and bottom, which will get us pointing closer into the direction that we need to make a nice smooth transition, unlike my talking, which is less than smooth. But no, we'll get a nice good flow and it should spool quick. Now for this, I'm just gonna use a zip disc and blast it off at our little marks here. Just make sure if you're doing something like this and you're cutting after the fact, flush this guy out real well. We had a slight intermission because I'm currently waging war on a bunch of wasps. They were apparently in the NADA frame rail, so we took the appropriate measures. I just noticed them because Cheddar's was outside and he just got zapped by a bunch of them. So I think he's all right, but we'll keep an eye on him. I haven't had to deal with that problem yet at the car wash. That was kind of a constant problem at the old ranch when we were in the woods. New one for here. So before we take the 2.5 inch tubing off, you get a pretty good visual of how much we gain there by zipping those guys off. So much more clearance. We'll get these off, get everything cleaned up and ready to modify. So we are cleaned up, and here are the little replacement covers. We're going to go right on top. We'll get the TIG welder out, buzz those in. But before that, we need to use what is quite possibly the most disappointing tool I own, and that is our press brake. I'll be shocked if we get through these two bends without it breaking. You know, it's just been so good so far. There's one. It's a freaking miracle. But that guy will go just like so. We just need to round the corners and punch a hole in for our tube. Just lighting stuff on fire. It's all good. All right, we're gonna see if I can stop this from burning the place down. Stop. But no, we're gonna see if this fits. We got miles of room now, and we're clearing the factory steering gear set up. In case we ever go left-hand drive, we can leave that intact, which is a goal, or was a goal, I guess. And we'll just buzz this guy in now that we know that works. Switch to a glove that actually protects you from heat. So we did the high-tech way of punching those holes in there. I probably could have used the CNC plasma and cut that piece out with the hole in it before we bent it, but I have the plasma pretty much laid up, ready to move to the new place, so I didn't want to like recommission it. So for 2 holes, easier just to use a hole saw. And now we need to modify our little grill radiator surround. This has been played with before, so we need to get the previous modifications out of there. I don't even think we have to cut this one. Yeah, maybe we should. Now we just need to make a little clearance in the side of the shroud there. The bottom has plenty of clearance for a tube to fit underneath in that cutout. So we just need to make a similar cutout up top here so the tube, the outlet of the intercooler, can slide through there. Today is a good day. We just had the press brake bend another piece and it worked. That's gonna be our little mount for this side of the shroud. We're gonna go through this and then we'll build a bracket for the opposite side once we have this one bolted on. So there it is, roughly mounted into place. Once this is all set, I wanna tie this lower piece into maybe this guy or something over here. Not quite sure, but for now, that's actually pretty secure. We'll get the grill actually bolted in, but I think we got good room out back here now. And I think looking at it, we're gonna come out of the bottom with a 90-degree welded onto the intercooler. And then on top, we're gonna come straight out and build the turn on our piping instead of having both of them swing 90. It should slot in easier that way. So we just need to slice this guy up. So this is gonna be ridiculously short, which is ideal when it comes to charge piping on a turbo. So I'm thinking we'll come out of the turbo, go up. Unless do we go, what do I wanna do? Because we could, no, we'll do what I was just thinking. So, come out of the turbo, go up to the top of the intercooler. We're gonna come out straight out of that. We'll have a coupler up there and we'll kind of work our way back to that guy. Then that will shoot through the intercooler and we're coming out of the bottom with this 90-degree deal and it'll sit something like that. I don't have enough hands. I'll set the camera down. That would be the smart thing to do. Thinking something like that. Yeah, that should work. I should mark that because that's what I like. Then we don't have to mark the top one because that's just coming out straight. So it doesn't matter the orientation. So here is the intercooler all set up. Give you a little better picture of what we got going on. So it's the mount, and we are doing a nice smooth transition out of the bottom. And we got quite a bit more surface area than the stock one would have. And hopefully it still fits. Hey, look at that. So I'm temporarily just using a couple nuts as spacers in our mount here. We'll fire the lathe up and make a proper one. All right, so intercooler's in place. All our silicone couplers are sitting about where they need to be. We have a little bit of a clock adjustment on these two. The straight ones are straight, so we do nothing with those. Not much to do with them. So I'm gonna start off working from the straight sections or from the intercooler side. So what we need to do is find a tape measure. Is easier said than done around here. Found one. And off these two straight sections, we are going to come off with bends right out of them. This top one's going to be a 90-degree bend, and then we'll work from there. This bottom one will probably be closer to 45 degrees or somewhere around there, but we're going to eyeball it. I don't actually measure anything as I grab a tape measure. I measure some things, but most of like intercooler piping, intake stuff, exhaust stuff in my world ends up being by eyeball. But the one thing we do need to measure is our straight section that we're going to weld onto these so that we can have something to clamp onto. So that's 1.5 inches on that one, and should be 1.5 inches on that one as well. So we need 2 1.5 inch sections cut out of our straight tube. And being it's just straight, we will use our little bandsaw. All right, so our straight sections are cut out, and all we're gonna do is just throw a couple tacks onto the elbows, and then we can move on from there. So this upper one, we'll work with a straight piece off of that, and we'll have some sort of 45 degree, 30 degree in between to meet up to that with straight, easy peasy. And then here, we just need to eyeball straight across to the silicone coupler. And we'll take this over to the portaband. This works out slick for cutting tube on the bend. This may work out even easier than I thought it would, and I thought it was going to be pretty easy. So that lines up pretty well. Now we just need to figure out how long the straight section needs to be. 4 1/4 looks good. So one at 4 1/4, and then I think this is gonna work out perfectly for the other side. Gotta love when it all just kinda slots together. 5 1/2 and 9 1/4. So 4 1/4, 5 1/2, 9 1/4. See if that guy fits in there. It should, but you just never know. There we go. Perfect. That actually sits in there real nice. Now let's see if we were anywhere in the ballpark on our estimation here. And I'd say we are just about perfect, because I can slide this one out some. I buried that side in the coupler quite a bit. Love it. So we'll get these 3 pieces tacked together. If this guy lines up, which it does perfectly, we can just run a couple ticks with a Sharpie, or better than a Sharpie, a Milwaukee ink saw. Writes on everything, even underwater, so they say. But that'll be our little reference point, and we're dripping sweat on it. And we'll slot this guy in, make sure it all lines up still after tacking it. And I love it. So everything fits, and I think it looks pretty good in there. It's a nice, short, free-flowing run, and minimal bends, the least amount we can do while dodging everything, because you have to come out at somewhat of an angle out of the intake manifold because there is an engine in the way. So I'll pull it apart, we'll weld this all out, and that should be a job done on our charge pipe setup. Not too bad, and that guy should do the trick. And kind of looks a little quirky in there, but it leaves a little bit of direct airflow to the radiator. Some of it will have to go through the intercooler first, but like I said, it's a 200 TDI, so we should have sufficient cooling capacity either way. All right, so before we weld these off, we went ahead and hit them with some Scotch-Brite to give them a nice consistent finish. We're gonna do some acetone and just get them all cleaned up, and it's just gonna end up with a better weld. Normally on stainless tube like this, we would back purge it, which means we would cap it off and put argon on the inside so that the inside of the weld looks just as good as the outside. Otherwise you get like a little sugar crystal stalagmite, stalactite, I don't know which one that is, little structure on the inside. But being these are charge pipe side or intake side, they aren't gonna see as much stress as say a downpipe or exhaust would. So we are just going to do a lighter penetration on these. We won't do 100%, we'll do like 85, and we'll be able to get by without back purging them because the weld won't even go all the way through. But then again, maybe we'll just back purge it anyways. It's actually pretty easy to do with our setup. We have a dual output regulator, so this is what feeds the welder. This side just goes to a bare tube, and we would stick that in there. So let me find some aluminum foil. Make a little hole. There, now we're all set up. How are you getting caught in that? So with that, we are complete on the charge pipe setup, and that is one of the big things left to getting this guy started off. We need to sort some wiring, probably should make an intake. I'm not sure what I want to do there. What do you guys think? Should I do a snorkel setup, or realistically we could just probably wrap something into this area and keep it fairly high and not worry about going up? I'm kind of starting to think if we loop something around and having filter box here, a nice sealed unit, that if we wanted to, we could come off and do a snorkel out the side. I think that's the ticket, but what do you guys think? That would leave everything up front here nice and open so we could do our radiator setup, radiator hoses without over complicating that area. But before that, I wanted to do a little bit of work on the LR4, but with the weather not cooperating once again, I think we're gonna push that off to the next video, which would be Sundays. You see, it seems to be monsoon season around here, and we have a complete day of rain, which normally wouldn't be that big an issue because we obviously work on the cars inside as much as we can. But I kind of created a little mess for myself here. Obviously, this mess has been created for a long time, but before we went to Colorado, we stuffed the LR4 truck in the machine shop side, which worked out. But when we got back from Colorado, this thing got dropped off. It's obviously not mine, and it is obviously large and obviously nice. So I don't want this sitting out in the rain. So one would think, swap the LR4 and the Defender and everything be fine. Did I mention this is big? Well, if we look at what we got going on there and what's up front, it's too large for the space over here, so it just doesn't work. And I'm not gonna let that thing sit outside in the storms, so we're just gonna have to pause on the LR4. I really wanted to get our Lucky 8 SYA kit installed. This is the strut spacer kit for all the air springs that is going to put it back into like the factory location with the lift installed. So this kind of makes up the space that the lift uses. So we'll be back down to factory air pressures or close. And then on top of that, it doesn't allow the wheel to travel as far up as it did without these. But we'll go over that in the next video, along with the fact that their t-shirts are nicely packed. I wish I was talented enough to do that. But no, that, and we'll move the air compressor. That's the next step on the LR4. But the good news is we have plenty to do yet. Even without the space for the LR4, we are going to just kind of tackle some small projects on the lightweight. Now, since we swapped over to a diesel, we really don't have much use for an ignition coil now, do we? And we're also going to ditch our washer bottle. I have a feeling this has been on there for quite some time. Years of like undercoating built up on it. Like I said, I think that space will be better utilized for our intake setup. And we can kind of route our brake line back into place. I think I'm going to tweak this some, but I want to get the wiring sitting before. But we got a bunch of moving pieces to do that. I want to get the wiring harness remounted and routed so we know what we have to dodge. And even though we're taking some stuff off like the ignition coil because we don't need that anymore, we do have some things that we need to add, and that is fuel filter. I think something like that. So this is kind of the nice thing about not having one that is a potential rivet counter. This thing is never going back to stock. It's been messed with its entire life. So we can just kind of roll with what ends up laying out best. We're gonna put some rib nuts in there, and while we have that out, we're also going to switch our little junction panel here from nut and bolt to installing some rib nuts where that was mounted before. So the previous owner put a new painless harness in this, like I mentioned before, and it's pretty decently routed, so I'm not gonna go ahead and overly change it. So we'll just kind of work off what was there before. So we'll use those holes, just punch them out. These are like possibly my favorite thing for any build. It's just so much nicer than having to use a nut and bolt to install things. All right, I think we're sitting in a pretty good place here. We can start sorting out all our wiring. Like we have to run this over to alternator. So we may have to change the length on that. Not a big deal. We'll be able to trim up our headlight harness because our headlights are there. We got all our lights in place, intercooler in place, need to get the radiator there. But this will clean up pretty easy, I think. What else are we missing? Heater core we can just loop and get rid of. So we'll run this guy into the back of the cylinder head. The lightweight doesn't quite have heat. It does have modern amenities like an airbag, but no heat. But I just went ahead and made a hardware list to go buy because we are going to switch everything over to matching hardware. Most of it matched before, but it matched in standard. I just prefer, if we're going after this stuff, I'm going to switch everything to metric. Everything I work on is metric. These are a conglomeration of stuff, but this one is going to be metric by the time we're done with it. So that is the next step on this, and then we can start cleaning up the rest of this mess. And speaking of cleaning up messes, we're gonna have one more regular video after this, which is gonna be installing the SYA kit and moving the air compressor in the LR4. So stay tuned, that's kind of a cool one. But after that, the next month around here is gonna be like a whirlwind. So I've created quite the mess of my life over this summer trying to buy another building that fell apart. That is officially done. As of today, that is not happening. I'm all right with that at this point. We have another place that we're moving to, and we actually probably start moving in a day or two from when you see this video, which is today. If you're watching it on Thursday, today is Thursday. I really should get ahead on stuff in my life, but chaos is better. So no, LR4 video, then after that we are sorting messes out. We're going to be in the car wash for a little bit more. We'll be utilizing the hoist and stuff as we transition because we'll have to set the new shop up, but we are going to be able to move the majority of my junk laying around here in the next couple weeks, which will take a lot of pressure off us around here. We are just consumed with not having enough space. I don't even know if that made sense, but either way, we just don't have enough space. I outgrew it. I didn't think I would, but I did, and here we are. So it's gonna be a fun week, and the next month should be pretty entertaining for you because I think we have some other stuff going on too, some other big news. That's to come later. I don't know why I put myself through the stuff I put myself through, but hopefully it's entertaining for you. We will catch you on the next one. Appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you subscribing. That's it. Curious what it looks like with the grill in place. I like it. Kind of cool.